Ooh, we're live. It's week 9, and no real ghost stories to tell. Maybe we'll talk about the ghost of the little bones that broke off, and Tony Romo's back, following up on our anatomy lesson here as we're previewing week 9. We got Dr. Gene Bramall, and of course Matt Waldman. And Matt, just to get us warmed up, because it was another wild and woolly day of college football yesterday, including one of the saddest plays you will ever see on a football field ever in the Ole Miss Auburn game. So we saw Gene Laquan Treadwell. So we're going to lead in with some college football. First, Matt, your notes on Laquan Treadwell pre-injury, and then Gene, I don't know if you saw a dislocated ankle and fibula fracture for the poor kid, and how that may affect him as a prospect. So take it away while I send this link out to everybody.
Well, I tend to watch college football differently than others, which basically means I'm studying tape all day from games from last year, earlier this year, and not watching anything that's going on. So this is the first I heard about Treadwell, which really stinks, because Treadwell's a big kid with some decent speed and excellent hands, and he's kind of a Michael Irvin type, if you ask me. I mean, he's kind of more of a physical, do everything, catch the football type of guy that you just throw it up, and a little bit like Des Bryant in that respect, maybe. So it's a huge blow if you're someone who is looking at Treadwell as a prospect for the NFL draft and fantasy leagues, and he's someone that I'm sure a lot of people, I can think of my buddy Mike McGregor comes to mind as someone who picked him in one of our leagues where you could pick a college player, and Treadwell certainly was a fine prospect, and he may still be, but it sounds like it's going to be a long road back for him, and it may change the way he plays his game.
Hawk, did you get to see anything of the injury mechanism or hear anything about that play?
I did. I was actually watching the game last night. It's one of the few times that I had college football on in the background. I usually take Saturdays to do other things than football to save my marriage and family and other things, but maybe I should continue that, because I looked up and there's...
Hey, for all you know, watching football is saving your marriage. See?
Well, that's true, too. I don't know that Jennifer would see it that way, but it's possible. So, yeah, I saw it live, and the replay, I pretty much tweeted it looked like it could be a dislocated ankle and possible leg fracture. And unfortunately, that's what it turned out to be. We're not hearing that the shin bone was broken. We're hearing broken fibula and dislocated ankle. It's a little bit bigger injury than what Robert Griffin III is dealing with right now. It's not necessarily something that's going to limit Treadwell in the long term. And I think you guys correct me if I'm eligible for the draft this year anyway, so he's going to have a year to recover, a year to play next year, and then we'll see how that goes. Now, if there's cartilage damage that's part of this, if the ankle dislocation is such that there's some chip fractures around the joint, it could be something that limits him in the longer term. But I think given 18 months to recover before the draft, and I guess that'd be 2016, hopefully he'll be back to what he was before the injury. It was definitely not only that, but just as they were lifting him up and putting him on the cart in an air cast, the referee came out and said, "Sorry, guy, you fumbled. It's not even a touchdown."
Yeah, it was.
And Auburn has the ball. So just as they were lifting him on the cart, just as you said, one of the saddest things.
It was seriously, if we had like a saddest play in football history. No. This is the number 4 against the number 3 team. Okay, and I think, what was it, Gene? Like a 90-yard play or something like that?
No, it wasn't that long, but it was they were driving to take the lead late in the game. I think there was 2.5 minutes left on the clock. Yeah. They threw a just a little bit of a bubble screen to Treadwell right between the 20 and 25.
Okay.
Fought through 2 or 3 tackles, dragged 2 guys, almost 3 guys inside the 5-yard line, and just as he was about to reach over the goal line, crossed as a linebacker, but the big defensive guy from Auburn landed on his leg funny, broke his leg as he was fumbling just inches away from the goal line. So,
with like 2 minutes left, and in the best Ole Miss football season, since what, Gene? I mean, Matt, like, when was the last time Ole Miss was in the top 5?
Eli Manning, maybe, and not even then. Probably Archie Manning.
Yeah, I can't imagine a crueler play on so many levels. So let's go ahead and get off of that down. I know. Sorry, Matt. Didn't mean to ruin your morning there. It was terrible. I mean, it was just like the football gods, and we see this in the NFL too. The football gods can be very, very cruel. Hopefully they're kind to us today. Kind of cruel to the Cowboys, Gene, as they lost the game, and now for today they lost Tony Romo.
Yeah, I think that's the case. This was something that was there were starting to be some trickles. David Channel on Twitter and a few others were talking about the possibility of a back injury and specifically a fracture. We talked about it on Thursday night show that what he could be dealing with was transverse process fracture. Turns out he's got 2 of those. Hard to know if it's likely that he's got 2 on the same side of the spine. Basically, if you kind of hold your spine out that way, if you run your finger down the middle of your spine, there's a process that comes out in the middle, and those 2 on the outside are called transverse process. Same side. It's not something that's it's a traumatic injury. It's not related to the disc problems he had last year. It's not related to the cyst surgery he had last April. He may have been prone to back spasms already because of those couple of injuries that he's had in the past. But that's the issue here. It's a little bit of pain control. It's a little bit of back spasm issues that are going on there. I think, although we've seen some guys try to play through this injury, and although we talk about, you hear back fractures, you think about paralysis and those sorts of things. It's not that type of injury. It would be something very difficult for him to play through, and as we talked a little bit on Thursday night, it's also something that's difficult to pad because you can't pad away him moving around his trunk, and it's something that would be difficult to inject and manage with pain injections, whether they be anti-inflammatories or an anesthetic pain mechanism. So it was always, I think I gave him a 20% chance of playing. I think he realized before he went to bed last night that there really wasn't going to be much chance of him waking up feeling good. And from what Ian Rappaport and a couple of local Dallas guys from ESPN are saying, and NFL Network are saying, that he didn't even want to give it a go this morning. He just knew that it wasn't the smart thing to do. The more interesting thing, and I'm sure we'll get into this next week, is what happens with him for Week 10. Is he going to be able to get on the plane and go to London? Will he be able to play through this injury? I think, especially since he's not out there taking hits today and risking not necessarily further damage, but continuing inflammation, continuing muscle spasm. I think you have to give him at least a 50-50 shot of playing next week, but we'll know more as he gets on the plane on Monday and whether or not he's able to practice by the end of next week.
And we saw at the end of the game last week that it's not so much, Gene, you often talk about cascade effects and things like that. I don't think it's so much compensating for his injury as I don't know that he can effectively protect himself. I don't know that he can effectively move around the pocket like he normally would. And I think that would increase the chances of a further injury. Not to mention, there's a good debate there whether they would have won the game if they had not put him back in there. He will get on the plane. I think this is going to be like Calvin Johnson. It's a London game. So for PR purposes, and by the way, I call, to me, Tony Romo is like the Paul Rudd of the NFL. The nice guy. Everybody, he seems like a real likable guy, but always sort of the loser or the punchline in the end. So, I think Tony Romo is one of the most visible players at Jacksonville on the other side. No disrespect to Jacksonville, but he's one of the marketable players from that game. But there's a good debate there, and based on that debate, Matt, for people looking to cover a Jay Cutler, an Aaron Rodgers, a Matt Ryan, bye this week, Matthew Stafford, what do you think about the suitability of Brandon Weeden compared to, Ryan Fitzpatrick or against Philly or Brian Hoyer against Tampa? You ready to take the plunge?
Yeah, I'm okay with taking the plunge on that because you still have quality players around him, and he certainly has a rapport with Des Bryant to an extent that there's some history there, and they had a lot of production. So, to me, putting him in the range of, I would say, between Joe Flacco and I don't know, probably Fitzpatrick, somewhere in that range. I would maybe even consider him almost even with Mike Glennon. I kind of like that range in terms of what the upside is for him. And I think that you have to look at the quality of this offensive line. It's still pretty good, even though there's been a recent injury. Running game's still working well. And, with all of that, if the Cowboys can get into a rhythm, with its running game early, then Weeden should have an easier time. And as long as he doesn't have to negotiate too much pressure, he can give you a 250, 270-yard day with maybe a couple of touchdowns. And that's all you can ask for from a bye week.
So no worries. You're going to stick with Des Bryant. Matt, what if you have a little tougher choices? Maybe you're weighing Jason Witten against another tight end, or you're weighing Terrence Williams against another wide receiver. Does it change their outlook? Are you less excited about them?
A little less excited about them. Maybe Williams a little less, only because I don't know how much of a rapport he has with Williams. With Witten, I think that Witten's one of those players where you're a veteran backup, or you've been a guy who's been through enough of the NFL rigors. I don't think Brendan Wheaton's an idiot. And I think that Brendan Whedon's going to basically, I think an idiot can throw the ball to Jason Witten as long as you've had some experience in the NFL enough that you've been knocked around. You know that guy's going to be your safety blanket, and I think that he'll do pretty well in that respect.
Gene, while we're on this topic of the Cowboys, I want to revisit something that we talked about in the preseason and something that has kind of faded into the background, but as we're making the turn here into the second half of the season and the stretch run for the fantasy regular season, we went into the season, well, I should say we, I should just speak for myself, really. I really thought, especially based on how poorly coached and coordinated the Cowboys defense looked, that they were going to be a vulnerable defense. They were going to be kind of a soft underbelly. I mean, even as far as looking ahead to Week 16 and Andrew Luck and Indy playing them. And the defense has played with a lot of pride, played with a lot of discipline. You've highlighted on our various shows a lot, guys like Orlando McClain playing better than expected. But we did see Colt McCoy hang a very good game on them last week. They're playing Arizona this week. Is it time to start revising them as a matchup, and could they end up being that fantasy all-you-can-eat buffet by the end of the season that we thought they might be?
Well, I think although the Cowboys' defense has been better than it was last year, at least there's a significant percentage of that that's due to DeMarco Murray and the way the offenses control the ball. Kept up with games better than they did last year. Time of possession hasn't been an issue because I think although the linebacker crew was better than we expected it to be with Sean Lee out. The secondary and the pass rush is still not great there. So I think DeMarco Murray has as much to do with how the Cowboys defense has done as anything else. And now, at least today with Tony Romo out, you can see that the Cardinals, even though they'll blitz a lot too, depending on how Kyle Orton is playing, you just have to be concerned that there's going to be stacked boxes against Marco Murray. You have to wonder if the Cowboys are going to be able to sustain drives, manage the clock, and we may see today the first hints of what we could see later in the year. I think Rolando McClain is, the durability issues. There were already some knee issues. There was conditioning problems during training camp. Now he's got a shoulder issue on top of the groin, on top of the knee that he's already been bothered by. It just doesn't look like he's moving the same way. Now they're going to use Kyle Wilber outside instead of Justin Durant, which is going to affect how they play outside the tackles, their quickness there. The secondary continues to be a problem. They're going to get DeMarcus Lawrence off the NFI list today. But rookie defensive ends, especially those that rely primarily on speed rush rather than technique, are not great bets to be effective immediately. So I think there's going to be some issues with the Cowboys, and as long as they can rely on that offensive line and DeMarco Murray, they'll be okay. The other thing with today is I think both Doug Free and one of their guards are going to be out as well. So they're going to be, they're going to be looking at two offensive linemen down, a quarterback that threatens downfield, which is not Kyle Orton's game usually, to be an issue too. So today might be a little bit different than what we saw earlier in the year for sure.
Well, if both guards are out, then forget that, because if he's going to have to deal with interior pressure, then that's going to be very problematic for someone like Whedon.
The one will be Doug Free, right? Wasn't he playing right tackle, or did they move
Free
him?
Right tackle, and I don't know if Leary's right guard or left guard. And Leary, I think, was questionable, but and ask the Eagles about how a strength on your offensive line can turn into a weakness with just a few injuries. Calais Campbell's healthy enough to exploit some of those holes, right, Gene?
Like he's after playing 60 snaps, which is about 30 more than I expected him to play last week. Practice this week, doesn't seem to be having any lingering issues with the knee. Between that and the blitz packages we've seen the Cardinals run from time to time, I'm going to see a lot of pressure on Kyle Orton. I would expect some max protect today for sure, and try whatever they can to scheme ways to get DeMarco Murray going early.
And Gene, by the way, Orton and Brandon Whedon would be very flattered.
Oh, yeah.
Comparing him to Kyle Orton.
It's probably would be a whole lot better, if they were.
I thought it's Patrick.
I was like, wait a minute, I don't think it's Kyle Orton, but that's the only one that's coming to mind right now.
Yeah,
Brandon
well,
Whedon, indeed. And there was actually, we had a little bit of discussion, John Lee and I, this morning with a couple of folks on Twitter about what that could mean from Jason Witten. And it was a good discussion because I think we've seen Whedon, John's point that we saw Whedon check down frequently. We saw Whedon use Jordan Cameron often in Cleveland.
yeah.
The question would be, we saw Tony Romo bring Jason Witten back into the backfield as max protect against Washington last week.
Right.
So you can see that one going either way. And if the Cardinals are going to blitz and they're going to bring one more guy than they have in protection, I think we're going to see a lot of Jason Witten on shorter passes over the middle, unless they leave him in there to block, because that would be the same side as Doug Free would be playing on. So there's a lot of variables going into what Brandon Whedon will be able to do and what he won't be able to do. I really think they're going to try to scheme ways. In some ways, although you have to have some level of continuity on the offensive line for those zone running schemes to work. In other ways, if you've got backup offensive linemen that have been in the system long enough, and I don't know if that's the case with Dallas or not, it may be a little bit easier for them to continue to scheme ways for DeMarco Murray, because a lot of that is reliant on his vision to pick out one spot. So if they can slow down that front three of Arizona at all, DeMarco Murray may still be able to get a good game today, and they may be able to scheme him ways to be effective in sustained drives. But it's going to be very interesting to watch the trenches in that game today, because I think we'll know very early on within the first couple of drives which way this one's going to go.
And I think Arizona, Todd Bowles is pretty much fearless when it comes to blitzing, and he has a big set of cojones when it comes to being able to blitz at will and not worrying about it. You've seen that in fourth quarter situations. So I think he's probably licking his chops against Whedon, knowing what Whedon's history is. So yeah, that's even more of a cautionary tale when you think about it from that respect.
A wide range of outcomes in this game, and just again to bring it back to some real football implications. Remember, this is Arizona, best record in the NFC right now, and Dallas, who was cruising towards potential division title, playoff berth, et cetera, despite low expectations. And obviously, we've gotten off of that plan a little bit. So let's see how this team answers the adversity. Great early game. Great afternoon game this week, of course, Brady versus Manning. Let's switch from medicine, and we'll get back to a few medical issues. Let's switch from medicine to meteorology. Matt, this is the first game of the year. I'm sorry, this is the first game of the year where you at least have to consider it. Okay, look, as fantasy analysts, we have to at least acknowledge and consider that it is rational to ask the question, does the wind advisory change? And it's not necessarily Brady or Manning. There's six teams on bye. 4 of them have strong fantasy quarterbacks, so that's probably not a luxury that you have. However, when we get down to guys like Brandon LaFell, maybe I'm not really sure who you would say the downfield passing game leader is for Denver, and that could be an answer. A viable answer to this question is, hey, Denver doesn't really pass downfield that much anyway. And for that matter, it isn't like Tom Brady's been airing it out. So I hate now I'm starting to answer the own question, which is terrible as a host. So I'm just going to toss it to you. Changing your outlook on anybody, or maybe even putting your outlook up on guys like Jonas Gray or Ronnie Hillman because of this wind advisory, or is this just voodoo?
I think you'd have to worry about Emmanuel Sanders a little bit, because that's who Peyton Manning does go downfield to. Demaryius Thomas should be fine because they like to throw the ball short to him and let him run with it. So maybe you'll see a little bit more of a split in shorter looks to Sanders and Thomas, but Sanders is the one that Peyton really does dare to go downfield with. So you may only see that half the time when the wind is in a favorable direction in terms of where they are, depending on what quarter it is and which side of the field they take early on. As far as Brady goes, yeah, LaFell, to me, I'm still waiting for the pumpkin to show up at midnight when it comes to LaFell. So he's played very well, but I'm still waiting. I'm still not quite sure about what I'm seeing there with him. And also Brady, I think that his deep game isn't that great, and I don't think it's been that great since Randy Moss. Usually, you could beat Kerry Collins, who had a horrible deep game, and have a decent deep game with a guy like Randy Moss, and Brandon LaFell is no Randy Moss. So looking at this, I would say the Patriots are going to be who they've been. You just may not see the downfield pass to Shane Vereen. So if you're looking at Shane Vereen as maybe that PPR option for you, who's going to make that one big play, and that's what you're thinking is with him as a tiebreaker over somebody else, then maybe you don't go with Shane Vereen this week because he's not going to get that downfield pass. But in terms of the rest of the players, I think the short intermediate passing game is going to be fine. And if you have Demaryius Thomas, if you have, Julius Thomas and Wes Welker, if you're looking at him as maybe a low end play, all those guys still are going to work out just fine for you. Emmanuel Sanders just may not have that high end opportunity, except maybe his opportunities may be limited, more strategic, and you just hope that they hit on the one or two that they throw his way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why you don't get cute with this. I mean, I really don't think, unless you were already on the fence and you were just looking for something to tip you to one side of the fence, don't get too scared. As kickers, maybe. Kickers, I guess, would be the one thing that you are asking for trouble. That is something with the wind advisory where the calculus of decisions in the game might change. Gene, what is going on with Washington? What team buses wrecking into each other? Players having whiplash? What is going on?
Oh, there we go. Okay, so it looks like there was a police escort this morning that failed to make an exit off the interstate, and in the process of the two buses behind the escort trying to figure out whether or not they should get off or not, the second Redskins bus ran into the first one and shook a number of the players off. Part of the windshield was cracked on that second bus. There might have been an injury to one of the police escorts, but Chris Russell follows Washington is suggesting that there's some concern from the team that there could be some bumps and bruises and maybe some whiplash type injuries that could affect the team today. It's a little bit early. I can see why the team might be concerned about that, but it's a little bit early to have that worry. The injuries, well, I think this happened around 9:30 Eastern time, so it's about 3.5 or more hours before the game is even to begin. And yes, it could be a problem approach game time, but those type of whiplash injuries, the muscle spasms as you involuntary to try to protect yourself in those situations, they tend to peak after the injury. So it's not something they'd know about immediately. Some bumps and bruises there, but there weren't any concerns from the initial reports that there was anybody there that was going to be significantly injured. So I think the hope would be get him in the locker room, get him warm, keep him warm, maybe use some anti-inflammatories, and I don't think this is going to be an issue. Could it become more of an issue as the game progresses? Yes. The first couple of tweets suggested that it was mostly team personnel, and it was the first wave of bus and include many players. Since that point, we've seen Pierre Garçon tweet. We've seen Keenan Robinson tweet. I don't know who was involved on the bus. I don't know who was there. It's something that I'm sure will be followed very closely as pregame warm-ups progress. But for right now, I would not panic over RG3, Alfred Morris, Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson, your defensive players. I think we need something pretty specific during pregame warm-ups for there to be a lot of concern about this for now.
I-95.
Well, I mean, I'm just picturing RG3 coming out there with the big collar. What are the names of those collars, Gene, that you wear like when you're testifying in court to look really, really pathetic?
we just call them C collars for cervical collars. Sometimes they're soft, sometimes they're hard.
The whole Washington team should just take the field in the C collars.
Better than a dog cone.
Yeah. Yes, the cone of shame. Dean, let's wrap up some injury stuff before we move on and talk some more a Week 9 preview. AJ Green back. Now, the question isn't whether to play him or not because, again, along with those quarterbacks, Calvin Johnson, Alshon Jeffrey, Brandon Marshall, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and so on and so forth. If you're actually thinking, should I bench AJ Green? Well, congratulations, your team is probably in excellent shape. But just give us an idea of expectations here because this was a shadowy situation, and then all of a sudden the sun came out, and so did AJ Green.
Yeah, and I'm sorry again for the sun coming out on me. I'm trying to back further and further away. I'll be in the next room by the time this show's finished, I think. I don't think AJ Green is going to play today, although Marvin Lewis didn't sound, there was some wishy-washiness in what he was saying on Friday. That particular type of wishy-washiness from Marvin Lewis is usually a good sign in the way that he said, AJ Green says he wants to play, he looks like he can play, it is what it is. I think that means he's going to go. There's multiple reports this morning that says he will play, and that's not surprising. He got in 3 consecutive limited practices, which not only means that there wasn't any sign of a setback this week, It also means that he looks to be pretty comfortable with the orthotic that he's going to be using in his shoe to support that area of his toe, limit the risk of aggravation, and hopefully keep him from experiencing that much pain during the game to where he can do what he needs to do as he comes in and out of the breaks of his pass routes. But it's hopefully that's the case. I think there's a relatively low risk of him aggravating the injury today. What's probably a higher risk is that they've got Jacksonville, who are down Andre Branch, who was, even though not great, was an important part of their pass rush. They're down Paul Posluszny, and I don't know if we specifically talked about this, but I've had some discussions on Twitter about Jacksonville's underappreciated run defense, and yes, that was the case, before a couple of weeks ago. But with Posluszny out, that's a different story there. I think Lamar Miller would have had a much better game last week had the Dolphins taken more than, I think they barely took 40 or 45 offensive snaps because of the defensive touchdowns they had. So I think it sets up well for a big rushing game for Cincinnati today at home. If they get a big lead on Jacksonville, there's really no sense in going out there and pushing A.J. Green just to get him back in condition. I think I'd probably bump him down a tier in our expectations today, but I don't see any reason to bump him out of the top 15. And he still has top 5 wide receiver upside. No reason for them not to try to feed him the ball early to see how he's doing. But I think game script may affect Green's upside today as much, or probably a lot more, than what his injury may.
And wrapping up these last few items, and again, folks, Insider Pro, you're going to get this and many other injury updates. You get the Monday morning injury rounds, and you will get the game day injury expectations updated right until game time. Those were the two big ones. Ronnie Hillman, and if you weren't tuned in on Thursday night, Gene tapped the brakes. I don't even know if slam the brakes might be better. I shouldn't say that actually. I shouldn't say that with Washington. See how cruel. Speaking of cruel, see how my brain operates. As soon as my brain is putting these things together, talk about Freudian slips. Gene was advising us to be cautious with RG3. And then a sort of a weird one with Owen Daniels, as he had a knee procedure last week and practiced and then didn't practice this week. Gene, just wrap up these last three items for us. Hillman with a shoulder, RG3 coming back from his ankle injury, and Owen Daniels.
Yeah, Hillman was back to a full practice on Friday. You're never really sure what's going on when you don't get to see the injury mechanism. All we knew on Wednesday was that he fell funny. He was taken out of practice. The Denver media was telling us all week that it was no big deal, and it makes sense for them with even a minor injury, given that Monte Ball is dinged up, and you probably don't want to roll into New England with this Juwan Thompson as your primary running back, that they would give Hillman as much time as necessary to settle down. So it's an even better sign that he was able to fully practice on Friday, rather than just being limited. I wouldn't have any hesitation with playing him today. Sure, if he takes a fall on that shoulder again, it might limit him for the rest of the game, but I'm not seeing any major reason for concern there. Owen Daniels is an interesting situation. He was able to fully practice on Friday, which is, I think, almost a little bit less than 10 days after his knee surgery. We don't know specifically what he had done, whether it was a clean-out procedure or just a little bit of look-see to what was going on in the knee, but that's much more optimistic than the original 2 to 3 week estimation that we were given for him. He's still considered a game time decision. I think they want to see how he responded on Saturday morning before giving him the green light today. He'll go through pregame warm-ups tonight and see if he can play. I think, given the fact that he's really pushing the optimistic side of the timetable, he's only got one full practice in, and it's an evening game tonight. I would only trust Owen Daniels in my lineup if I had a good hedge, and there's not that many of those. Maybe Kobe Fleener would be a guy that you'd want to hedge him with if that's a possibility, but I think he's probably best left on the bench today, even in some deeper leagues. Robert Griffin III, my concern with him is last week's video of him moving around, he still looked like he had a pretty good hitch in his gait. Doesn't look like he's moving comfortably. The two major issues for Griffin over the past 18 months have been his inability to move comfortably in the pocket and his inability to have the correct footwork to drive passes accurately downfield. Looked like he was getting over some of those issues earlier this season, but until we see him move fluidly in and out of the pocket, I'd be worried about him not only being able to get through a full game. I don't know that that's a big issue because he's been conditioning and doing football-related stuff for the past 2 to 3 weeks, but just general effectiveness. Will they rely on Alfred Morris a little bit more? Will Griffin be able to hit those shot plays downfield to Deshaun Jackson and those short, quick slant routes to Pierre Garçon that he was known for a couple of years ago? I would like to see that that's the case on the field before I put him in a fantasy lineup.
Maybe they opened up a Tana Lutefisk on the bus.
That's a great King of the Hill episode, by the way. Um, yeah, and just to add to the picture, and just to again put a little edge on Gene's caution. And Gene, I'm starting him over Austin Davis and Ryan Fitzpatrick. Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't know. Ryan Fitzpatrick's matchup today is pretty good, don't you
You
think?
gotta mess with me. All right. See, well, don't ask the question if you don't want the answer. I guess. Well, because just to add
Austin
a little.
Davis, absolutely. I would start. Yeah, I think I would go with Griffin's upside, even not knowing how much upside he has over Austin Davis for sure. But there, Ryan Fitzpatrick at home against Philadelphia. I don't know. I think you can still see the same upside downfield with DeAndre Hopkins, and short dump off passes. I would rather be dumping the ball off to Arian Foster than Jordan Reed has not been getting as much usage as we probably expected him to. I think that's a much closer call.
This is the one case where I may go with Harvard over Baylor.
Ah, nice. Very nice. So what I wanted to add to that picture, by the way, is now there's some stuff going around via Adam Schefter that the decision to play RG3 came from above Jay Gruden, which shouldn't give you confidence, okay?
It shouldn't be surprising. It's Daniel Snyder that we're being hinted at here.
Yes. So what's interesting to me about this game in general, and I'm not sure how much this is going to apply with Washington going into their bye next week, but we only got to see RG3 with Gruden's offense for a game and a part of a quarter. And that first game against speaking of the Texans was very, very conservative. A lot of short passes. And RG3, his passes were actually very accurate, and he looked very solid as a passer. He just couldn't move. I mean, the analogy I used was the baby fawn on the frozen pond. I mean, that's what he looked like when he was trying to move around the pocket. And so I don't know. I still feel like we haven't seen the unveil yet, and we may not see it today against Minnesota, of what this is going to look like with him in this offense. So this is interesting. Speaking of offensive changes, Matt, when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I cannot, and this is something that anybody who's been listening to the show even for a week should know, that there is a team that my radar, my instruments get thrown off. It is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I say this because there was a time not that long ago, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, where the Steelers came out in the preseason and a lot of hurry up, a lot of up-tempo, and really letting Ben Roethlisberger, who was a point guard at Miami of Ohio on the basketball team, I'm pretty sure. Don't totally quote me on that. My point, he was a basketball player. My point is this, or maybe high school. Sorry. My point is this: that point guard mentality for the quarterback, and you basically, you Harlem Globetrotters it up because you have all these talented guys, and you can spread the ball around. You can keep the defense on their heels, and it can be something pretty special. We haven't had. I think that the Steelers tried to do that with Tommy Maddox for a little bit. It was back in the days of Yancey Thigpen, but really we've seen Todd Haley muck it up. We've seen Ben Roethlisberger, even with some of his audibles and things, muck it up. Now, last week against Indy, we saw something that could be pretty special, especially because of these elements. Lance Moore working in the middle of the field, Heath Miller working in the middle of the field, Martavis Bryant stretching defenses, Antonio Brown just being Antonio Brown, even Marcus Wheaton contributing that. So I feel like I can't reasonably evaluate whether this could be the Steelers' offense to some degree, obviously not to the degree of 522 yards and 6 touchdowns. I want to believe, Matt. Am I getting pulled in? Are they going to just disappoint me again?
I think you're just being neurotic about the Steelers because, man, the more I get to know you guys who are Steelers owners, who are like old-time Steelers owners, the more neurotic you guys get. I mean, it's more like, oh, they just can't be that good.
It's the Cowher years.
Go wrong.
It's the Cowher years, man. It's 96. It's the Super Bowl against the Cowboys. It's the 98 AFC title game. It's the 2001 AFC title game. It's the first year that Cowher was the coach. They went into the playoffs #1 seed and got blown out at home by the Bills. Sorry. Go ahead.
I call it Schottenheimer's revenge because Cowher got his start, as Cleveland Browns linebacker and then eventually a special teams coach and all that. Rose up through Schottenheimer during those years and with the Browns Denver matchup. So I think it's Schottenheimer's revenge.
Fair.
That's what I'm going to call it. I think it's I think it's good for Pittsburgh what's going on right now, and I've been saying this all week. Martavis Bryant is for real. Martavis Bryant is someone that you need to be picking up. He's someone you need to be considering as your third receiver, mainly because of really 3 things. One is that Ben Roethlisberger has never had a tall, fast, reliable receiver all in one package. He's had Plaxico Burress, who is not fast, but who's had the height in the hands. He's had Lima Swede, who's had the height, and he's had a bunch of short guys, and that's basically it. So he is relishing this opportunity. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger was probably more straightforward about this and didn't need his dad to get involved with trying to draft, a player like Odell Beckham. Sorry, Giants fans. I know that, Archie is probably doing this with the controls here. At least Eli's trying to do that now with the Giants. Draft Odell Beckham. He's my buddy. It's working out. But I would say that this was one of those ones that made sense because Roethlisberger is a quarterback who can rely on the deep ball, who can also rely on being able to throw the 50-50 ball. Bryant is good at all those things, but what he's gotten better at since the spring is releases. You've seen him be able to demonstrate good handwork and footwork against defenders. He had probably what should have been a 77-yard touchdown on a slant that he dropped. It was a rare drop, but what he did on that play was be able to release against the corner so quickly that if he caught that ball, he already had 2 steps on the defender. It was a terrific play in terms of just seeing a guy's development, and he was showing that on a routine basis. In contrast to a guy like Dante Moncrief, who made a nice play after getting hit by Troy Polamalu. Most of his plays were in wide open spaces. And he was working off of other players in that Colts lineup to get open and then using his athleticism in open space. Bryant, in contrast, is getting open, creating space on his own against defenders who are playing him in press and also playing in the middle of the field. So when you look at what one player like Bryant can do for a team, because they know now that it's not just don't let Mike Wallace get behind you, it's more like now we really have to legitimately cover a big, tall, fast wide receiver. That's going to open up the offense for a number of things. It made Marcus Wheaton's job easier because now they can put Marcus Wheaton as kind of that super slot receiver, Emmanuel Sanders in Denver type of player who is buffered by Demaryius Thomas and Julius Thomas and Wes Welker, and now it's now he may be the number 2 or even sometimes the number 1 fantasy receiver for people, but he's getting a lot of help because of the respect defenses have to play around those surrounding talents. It's the same thing in Pittsburgh now. Marcus Wheaton gets some opportunity. The fact that Bryant and Brown and Miller, that creates a triumvirate where they are going to, now Wheaton is running free and not having to be the guy that Roethlisberger was trying to make him be, which is, let's go downfield to you and force the ball in situations where you don't have the height and maybe not have the route specialties to be able to handle what I'm throwing at you. And Bryant erases some of Roethlisberger's inaccuracies to be pinpoint on some of these downfield fade routes. He can make up for that with his height and ability to adjust. So I like what I'm seeing here. I think it works out pretty well. There's no mystery here, but I do have to add here that before we go, there is an unidentified object that we have to share here on your screen.
Oh.
See the little circle I have circled here in orange? Yeah. What is that? And does that have anything to do with your Pittsburgh stuff?
It actually was Day of the Dead, Halloween. Hold on a second. Lots of good macabre things in our house.
See, this is awesome. I've been wondering about this. I've been looking at it and wondering what the heck is this?
So stop the screen. Very good at breaking down film here, Matt. I'm impressed.
That's my job, man.
No detail left uncovered.
One of these times we're going to do like the MTV Cribs version of the Hangout. So these are actually good macabre things. We've got a lot of macabre things in our house. So here we have a Day of the Dead, sort of just nice Day of the Dead woman, some flowers, live flowers.
Wasn't Night of the Living Dead filmed?
Yes, Night of the Living Dead. It was Washington County. There are still a lot of people around where I grew up that were in that film. George Romero, King of Horror. And then over here we have, and Matt, I know you business cards are important. Gene, business cards are important. This is like a nice business card holder on a chili pepper. See, and this is Texas. This is our Texas effect here, the chili pepper. And so there you go. There's a lot of fun stuff in here. A lot of
You'd have some bathroom humor with that one right there.
yes, and there are also some items that may get the authorities a bit interested. So we won't go too deep into the decor here. So, Gene, going back to this Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, and before we move on from Martavis Bryant, I do want to say, and the bottom line that you should take out of the fantasy implications here is Martavis Bryant is an excellent boom-bust wide receiver 3 flex type play because he can get a 70-yard touchdown on any play. And the other thing I want to point out, and this is where the fact that we have Matt Waldman and his RSP experience, it's so valuable because, and Matt, you and I talked a lot about Martavis Bryant in the off season, in the draft season, and the thing about Martavis Bryant was he did nothing. He's a first-round physical specimen, did very little early in his career at Clemson, or even in the middle of his career. In his senior year, was the number 3 receiver. Came on and got a larger role as the season went on and started to exhibit more of the qualities that showed that he could take advantage of the tremendous natural tools that he had. And if you were plotting it on a line chart and you were saying, here's how he was growing as the season was going on last year, and then we see where his first 2 games as a pro are, they're up here. He's continuing to grow.
And as we mentioned with him, the tipping point was literally after he got suspended at Clemson, and it's well known, it's documented, you can find it and look it up. Basically, he got suspended, and the coach came and said, "Look, are you willing to work? Because you weren't willing to work." And he went home, and he was home during the Chick-fil-A Bowl against LSU, didn't play, and I believe it was mom or his grandmother said, "Look, kid, you're blowing it. You are blowing your chance to become something." And he listened to his family and came back and actually became accountable and a very hard worker and much more interactive with his teammates in a way that he wasn't before. We couldn't be happier with him.
Well, and the career near-death experience is a really interesting thing. And you have these 2 views of human nature, and your view of human nature as a fantasy football owner, as a GM of your team, because on one hand you have, rotten eggs stay rotten, on the other hand you have people can change, and sometimes you really have to have the threat of that thing taken away or actually have it taken away. This is why the Josh Gordon debate sometimes bothered me. I mean, sometimes it takes that real threat. It's just like my 4-year-old son, my lovely 4-year-old son Miles. He will play with us about defying us until he actually sees that we are taking away the thing that we're threatening to take away, and then he turns remorseful, and he actually wants to do the thing we're asking him to do. So, comparing these players to children might seem like a stretch, but the point is that you never know what's going to be that trigger for somebody. All we can do is evaluate the player and get the information from the outside peeking through keyholes that we get, and look for the signs that things are changing. And wow, are there signs that things are changing for Martavis Bryant? Gene, how important is it that Jimmy Smith is out tonight? If you were thinking about playing Marcus Wheaton or Martavis Bryant or Ben Roethlisberger, how important is that?
Yeah, I think it's important for both of those guys because it's going to affect what they do outside. They'll move Dominic Franks outside where he's not good. I would expect him to be picked on as much as possible by Ben Roethlisberger, and it means that Terrence Brooks, although I liked him as a free safety, is probably going to be the guy they move down to the slot with Asa Jackson still waiting to come back from the IR return list. Now, they may decide to do something different tonight, but that was kind of the way they played it last week after Jimmy Smith left, and I don't think that Terrence Brooks, as good as a cover safety as he is not Antrell Roll, Tyrann Mathieu, those sorts of players where Rondé Barber, Kenny Vaccaro, where he's likely to be successful in the slot against Marcus Wheaton. Now, I don't think that means that Wheaton's going to get 10 to 12 targets and multiple catches and what have you today, but I think that Antonio Brown's targets and touches and catches are going to go down. But I think that there's reason to believe that both Bryant and Wheaton are in line for a bigger game than you might have ordinarily expected tonight because of that.
Well, and again, and I don't want to let my Steelers... If Kian was here, Kian would be holding up the Steelers Super Bowl train sign. I want to get my heart be still my beating heart, but I mean, I really do think if they take the shackles off and they really just let this offense flow freely, this could be something pretty special. And yes, I'm even saying this could end up turning into a very interesting season for the Steelers, despite all my naysaying and lots of other neurotic Steelers fans out there. And I know, and it's annoying that we would be neurotic having won 2 Super Bowls and getting to another one in the last 10 years. So yes, we're annoying. Steelers fans are annoying. I get it. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that's all right. We don't even have to pixelate that, man. We don't even have to pixelate that.
As just a natural reaction growing
It's
up in
good.
Cleveland for a long period of time. I mean, isn't it
Yeah.
for you, Gene, as a Cincinnati guy? Even if you're not a huge Cincinnati fan?
There were two levels of Cincinnati fandom in my life. Either we were the best team and had our hearts broken in the Super Bowl, or we were terrible. So either way, I
So
don't
you
care
guys are
that much about the Steelers.
basically.
But yeah, no, Cincinnati fans hate the Steelers and the Browns pretty much equally.
Okay.
And that's fair. That's really fair. And the Steelers in the good old days. Well, yes, and that's well. So there you go. Sad plays. So what was the saddest play I saw on a football field before that Treadwell play? That might have been it. Although, hey, bring it all full circle. Carson Palmer ready to light it up against the Cowboys today. So there could be a happy ending here in the end. More week 9 goodness. And again, what's really fun here is I want to just continue to accentuate the positivity, because the positivity is we get this Arizona Dallas game. We get in the afternoon we get Brady Manning 16. We get Steelers Ravens 41. And Indy and the Giants could be an interesting game. Speaking of the Giants, Gene, I want to just touch on this really quick, and you can go ahead and throw Ryan Matthews in here too, because both Rashad Jennings and Ryan Matthews have been out long enough that these aren't insignificant injuries. Where Darren Sproles came back, is going to be back today, very likely within a couple of weeks of his. These ones are stretching out longer. So as we look at the outlook, this is a time that you might still be able to trade for Rashad Jennings or Ryan Matthews. How foolish is it, or how wise is it to think that by week 11, week 12, you shouldn't discount these guys? They can be back to what we expected them to be.
Well, I think there's two different things going on here. First of all, from an injury perspective, we finally got some positive news on both of these guys this week. No, neither one of them are going to play. But Ryan Matthews has finally been cleared to run, and he sounds like he's close enough where there's a chance he'll play in week 10. Rashad Jennings was feeling good enough to pull a heavy sled off to the side. I think the Giants probably did the smarter thing by allowing him to get his conditioning back so that he's not at high risk of a soft tissue strain as a reconditioning or cascade type injury, and he should be back in week 10 if things progress the way we expect them to. But in terms of trading for them, I think there's two different situations here. Ryan Matthews, in the time he's been out, we've seen Brandon Oliver play well. Donald Brown is coming back off his concussion this week too. I don't know that we're going to see Ryan Matthews get more than 10 to 15 touches in any given week, and it may be tough for him to do that, because I think we're going to see Brandon Oliver in some passing situations, and I think he'll rotate on early downs as well. Whereas Rashad Jennings, although Andre Williams has looked okay, was starting to get a few red zone looks before Jennings was injured. I think we can reasonably expect Jennings, when his conditioning is back, to get 15 plus touches a week. So in terms of which guy I would rather have, I think it's unquestionably Jennings. And I think for a stretch run, there's a good chance that you could see Jennings as a top 15 option, whereas I think Matthews is probably, barring an injury to Oliver or something happening with Donald Brown, both of those guys again. Hard to see him as more than a low-level running back to flex play.
Okay, we want to talk to Charles Sims, and in my mentions, I saw a good prompt here from Pierre Tippeth at Randall 1014, asking us to talk about Charles Sims, and we have some plot thickening here from courtesy of Adam Kaplan, one of the very trustworthy NFL insiders out there. Matt, before we begin to talk Charles Sims, for those people evaluating Charles Sims as a trade target or a pickup target for the second half of the year, give us that 50 words or less scouting outlook. And having seen Tampa's offense this year, the offensive offense that they've trotted out there sometimes, what's your outlook for the rest of the season? Not this week, because we've got some clouds forming about Sims this week, but rest of the season.
Rest of the season for Sims?
Yes, sir.
I don't see much difference between Sims, Bobby Rainey, and Doug Martin. I mean, when it comes to this offense, it just matters who's going to get the most carries, and then how mediocre they're going to do at this stage. I mean, I think that's really it. I mean, I know everyone's like, "Oh, Charles Sims," and I'll just say, to make it quick, Charles Sims is along the track of a mix between, say, Darren McFadden and DeMarco Murray. He's somewhere between those two guys. I think he's better than Darren McFadden as a conceptual player. Not quite as physical or as talented as DeMarco Murray, but he can catch the football really well. He can make a man miss in the backfield. He's got some vision, but he's a little bit of a more of a Murray McFadden style of runner, a little upright and lowers his pads into contact, and he's more of a run bender than a cutter when it comes to changing direction, which doesn't mean that he's not good. It just means that that's kind of the style that he is, and he's going to need some bigger holes in what they offer in Tampa for him to be what some people are unbelievably, hopefully trying to strike gold with. When I hear at this stage of the season, they're like, how good is, is this the guy that's going to carry me to the promised land? That's what the tone of the question seemed to be about Sims all the time.
Right. And it's we're looking for, hope. We have to have hope somewhere. And I'm with you, Matt. It's still Tampa. But, Gene, we're hearing now about Charles Sims, Adam Kaplan saying, well, even though he's activated, his report is they may wait to play him another week. So what's going into that decision based on what we know about that injury, and based on that, does that jive with what you would expect?
I think we're starting to get a little bit more information about what's going on with Sims. Adam Kaplan said yesterday that the injury was some sort of disruption to his peroneal tendon, which is kind of the same thing we've talked about with Jamal Charles and Andre Ellington, but it's at a different level of the tendon because the surgery was around his ankle. That's a tendon that kind of comes down the back of the leg, goes along and underneath the outside bone of your ankle, and then out to that outside part of your foot. Ellington's injury is closer to the foot insertion where that tendon is. Sims's injury seems like it was a little bit closer to the ankle. It's an injury that often takes 3 months to recover from at minimum. Sims is kind of ahead of that right now. Not sure, because we hadn't heard all that much about him, how much he's been in condition and whether or not he's having a little bit of pain or soreness there. Could be any number of those things. It's early for his recovery. His conditioning may not be all the way there yet, and there's really not a whole lot of sense, since he's already missed as much time as he has, in pushing him a week or two early if they're not 100% certain that he's ready to go. Risk of aggravation, risk of a worsening injury, risk of a cascade injury. None of those things are probably worth risking today. I think that's probably what's going on. But he seems like he's close. If he doesn't go, they activated him yesterday with a plan. I would assume that he would play this week because he can still practice, I think, for one more week and without needing to come off. So I think there's a chance that we'll see him next week if he doesn't go today.
And even if he's active today, I think this still casts some doubt on how much they'll use him. If you're going to play a Tampa Bay running back, play Bobby Rainey this week. Let's just put it that way. Sims is a true no alternative desperation play. Like if you just don't have anybody else to plug in, I think even active, because Adam Kaplan is not the type to put things out there like this just to get his name out there or something. I think that somebody reliable, if they're having doubts even this late, then we don't know what we're going to get. And if you have Sims on your bench and he goes off, then you're still a winner in the long run. We've got a couple more minutes here before we go and resume our lives here in another wonderful NFL Week 9, and again the triple header, at least as our the marquee games. I want to go through maybe a little bit of let's say a little lightning round, some quick hitters, you guys. I'm going to toss some questions at you, okay? And you brought up Cleveland, Matt Waldman, so I'm going to give you a Cleveland question here. Against Tampa, and a Tampa team that you never quite what you're going to get. They can be the worst team, or they can surprise you and beat you at home. Pittsburgh Steelers fan. So if Tampa is a matchup, Jordan Cameron out with the concussion, are you in a week when everybody is scrambling for wide receivers? Is this a week when Andrew Hawkins could end up being someone who tilts matchups and wins for you?
He could be. He or Gabriel. Those are the two that come to mind, because Gabriel seems to also be he seems to be taking opportunities away from Hawkins to the extent where Hawkins isn't that high upside guy that looked so promising in the preseason. So he's worth a shot, but it's a coin flip between he and Gabriel.
So did you cover Gabriel in the RSP?
Nah, I didn't even know who he was.
Yeah, I mean that's, and I'm not doing that to show up Matt or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, this was a find. This was a find. No, this was a real find for this team. He's taken, and Travis Benjamin was healthy earlier than we expected, but he's past Benjamin, and certainly, and he's one of those players that you would look at. What are his dimensions, Matt? Like 5'9", 170 or something?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe like dripping wet, but dude can play.
Yeah, he can.
And so kudos there for them to find him. Gene, I'm going to do this to you because you brought this on because you touted Kansas City as a team defense. Sorry, nails on a chalkboard. But not just this week against the Jets, but if you picked up Kansas City to play against the Jets this week, we had that run for about 8 weeks last year. Some of it was backup quarterbacks. But could we see, and Eric Berry's going to be back. Could we see this Chiefs defense return to form? We know the Panthers probably won't, but could the Chiefs do that?
I think the Chiefs are already there. I mean, I don't follow team defenses closely enough to know, yardage, points, whatever. But I think from a turnover generating defense, the front seven is as healthy as it's always been. Eric Berry, he'll be back today. I don't know how much he's going to play, but that'll put some big play value into the back. The cornerbacks there. If the corners were a little bit better, then I don't think there'd be any question that this would be a defense to target. But if your league is heavy on sacks, fumble recoveries, those sorts of things, I think Justin Houston and Tom Bahali are both very good at strip sacks, and I think Michael Vick's understanding of how to play in the pocket and the way his ball security exactly.
Yeah. Well,
ball security is inside and outside the pocket. I think is a good setup for Kansas City today too, especially at home.
And bonus, you might get Nile Davis returning a kick for you. So I think the Chiefs. Is Ron Parker going to stay at free safety?
Over who?
Well, wasn't he playing free safety when Berry was out?
Yeah, I think the suggestion is that Berry will not play fully today. I don't know if that means he's going to rotate or if he's just going to play in the base or if he's just going to play in sub. Is not sure exactly how that goes down. We're still waiting to hear what's going on with Joe Mays as well. I think Ron Parker's going to have a role. He was playing some corner, so if he goes back out to corner, I think he played coverage pretty well at safety. I don't know how well he'll translate back outside, but that's definitely going to improve the secondary.
So, defense. If you like that game, defense. We got a good matchup here. San Diego, Miami, 12 teams in the AFC at 500 or better. These are 2 of them. Matt, I'm just going to toss it to you like this. Miami has been a team that when we've asked them to measure up, they've disappointed. And the Chargers are, I think, embodying Phillip Rivers. They've been a team that has been pretty steady. What do you expect to go down here in South Florida today?
Well, I'm in upside down mode right now. But actually, I would say, looking at this, I expect that San Diego is probably going to win this one pretty handily. I think that, I guess what you would depend is, Gene, where's Verrett at? Jason Verrett?
He's in trouble.
His
shoulder is still bothering him a lot. There was a report this week. Yeah, and it's something that's he's been it's been repaired once. He's trying to play through. It was something that probably needs surgery. I think he's trying to give it a go because he's an important part of the defense in a team that's looking forward to making the playoffs. But wasn't able to play through the injury last week. Has already been ruled out this week. There were reports I think midweek this week that they were looking at surgery for him again. It seems unlikely that he's going to make it through the rest of the year.
Well, then in that case, that means that Miami's going to have a fighting chance in this game, I think, in that respect. So I would revise what I was initially going to say, knowing that Verrett isn't all that healthy and not going to be able to play. Looking at this, I think that what you could see is a pretty decent aerial display by both teams at this stage. And then that means it could be a nice fantasy opportunity for pretty much everybody involved. This might be the week where you actually look at some of these 3rd and 4th wide receivers on each team and say they could be pretty good flex plays. Like Brian Hartline might actually be a decent flex play this week. I'm still not sold on Landry, not as a talent. I think he's a good talent, just how they use him. He's just a dink and dump guy right now. Until they can make him Marcus Colston, I wouldn't be jumping on board his wagon right now at this stage. But I also think Keenan Allen is coming on. I don't think it was just a matchup thing against Denver. I think you're going to see them rely on him a little bit more in San Diego. I think they've given up on Ladarius Green at this stage. a few weeks ago. So I think that between Allen, Floyd, and Gates, you've got a pretty good trio that's going to be able to wreak havoc against Miami's defense. I don't think the likes of Deion Jordan are going to, really going to come to the fore against the Chargers just yet. Though I will be interested to see what he looks like against the likes of King Dunlap on that side, and whether or not his speed is going to be cause some problems. But Rivers is such a veteran at being able to climb the pocket. I think that this is going to be, again, a good aerial game. You're going to see this is going to be a PPR matchup dream, I think, for a lot of players.
Yeah, we'll see if Ryan Tannehill can help the offense not look like a waste product, as Mike Wallace characterized it after the game against Jacksonville. So that's going to be a very entertaining game. We'll say that's like the number 2 marquee game of the early games. Last parting shot, I just want to toss this to you because I'm at a bit of a loss as much as anybody, but we are seeing one last item across the wire that Adrian Peterson could work out a plea deal as early as Tuesday. And there's people in my mentions asking me about this, and my gut reaction is, well, under the new domestic violence policy, he still has a 6-game suspension. And that would put him, even if the plea deal is done and then the NFL hands down their suspension, the Vikings are on bye. It would put him out for the rest of the fantasy regular season. And there are people in my mentions asking me, well, credit for time served, or what about the fact that he's been out? I can't recall the NFL ever doing that. I don't think that's how the NFL deals with suspensions. Now, after everything that's happened this year, I am not going to say I know what the NFL is going to do. Done that. You first. I mean, what's your knee-jerk reaction to hearing this, and how it may relate to Peterson's availability?
You broke up on me, so I'm assuming you're coming to me first. I don't know. I just don't see a team putting him on the roster this year. I think that would be my first gut feeling, regardless of whether or not it's time served or what the length of his suspension may be. I think at some point Peterson will be back in the league. I just have a hard time thinking that that's going to be this year.
Matt, any instant reaction to this news?
I'm kind of hoping that the league puts Roger Goodell in Adrian Peterson's jersey and sends him out onto the field. Maybe we could have some time served there, too, for 4 quarters.
Yeah, I don't know if it was too soon, but I was hoping there was some good NFL-related Halloween. I mean, Halloween is for macabre. Halloween is for kind of looking underneath rocks and things like that, and all of those things come out at night.
We could have a bad political cartoon, and I will say this is going to be very tasteless. So, but I will say it. We should put Roger Goodell in one of those white tank top.
Yes.
White, yeah.
Quote.
Yeah.
Well,
put him in one of those.
You could definitely see if people could get the high concept there of that Halloween costume. Here, people will go over that line, and I'll just leave it at that. Whatever line it is, whatever line you thought of, we knew somebody who dressed up as a Texas A&M bonfire victim the year of the bonfire. So it's woo. But anyway, now I'm really way off the reservation here. So I should just pull the plug.
That's my job, is to push you off.
Yeah. Yes. No, wonderful stuff, folks. Week 9, another fantastic season to the schedule makers and to the people who laid on the line for us. Speaking of Tony Romo probably not playing, I mean, these guys are laying it out on the line for us every week, and for other things, fame and fortune and so on, but it makes our Sundays a lot more fun. You make our Sundays a lot more fun. I hope that everyone continues to enjoy and get some use out of us getting to hang out, because Matt and Gene and I just like to talk, hang out on Sunday morning, and we love that you out there enjoy that too. Enjoy your Sunday. Hope you get some wins, and we will be checking back in with you as we always do. 8 episodes a week. We got 2 hangouts a week and many other things here for you from the Audible from FootballGuys.com, and we always ask you to stay classy.